The ER's automatic doors slammed open so hard they bounced off the rubber stops, and every head in triage snapped up at once. A man filled the doorway like a moving wall. 7 feet easy, wide shoulders under a soaked black hoodie, water dripping off his sleeves and pooling on the tile. His breathing was loud enough to cut through the beep of monitors, the murmur of families, the distant intercom calls. He took one step in, and the security guard at the desk instinctively stood, hand hovering near his radio like it might save him. The man's eyes were bloodshot, not drunk, something sharper. Panic, rage, and pain braided together so tight it looked like fury. "I need a doctor," he growled, voice low, rough like gravel in a blender. "Now." The triage nurse, old hands, calm face, lifted her palms. "Sir, I hear you, we're going to help you, but you need to." "Don't talk to me like I'm stupid," the giant snapped, and the whole room shrank back. And that's when I saw her. Not the triage nurse, not the charge nurse. The one behind them, half shadowed by the glare of the nurse's station lights, holding a clipboard like it weighed nothing. A young woman in navy scrubs, hair pulled back tight, no jewelry, no drama, a badge that said nurse residency under her name. Mara Calder. A rookie by appearances, someone you'd expect to hand out warm blankets and apologize for delays. But she didn't flinch. She watched the giant's hands, big enough to palm a basketball, clench and unclench like he was trying to keep them from doing something he couldn't take back. He stepped forward again, closer to the desk, too close. "I said now." The security guard's spine stiffened. The triage nurse reached for the panic button under the counter. And Mara set her clipboard down. Not with a slam, not with a show. Just down, like she was making room for what had to happen next. Pause. Mara stepped out from behind the station and into the open space between the giant and everyone else. Her voice was quiet, but it cut straight through the noise like a clean blade. "Sir," she said, "you're in the right place, but you're not in control here. Take one step back and lower your hands." The giant blinked like he couldn't believe she'd spoken to him. He looked her up and down, and the corner of his mouth twitched, almost a laugh. "Who are you?" he said. "You some kind of intern." Mara didn't answer the insult. She didn't even acknowledge it. She kept her stance open, feet planted shoulder-width, hands visible, calm face. Her eyes didn't look afraid. They looked trained. The kind of calm you see in people who have already been in rooms where things went wrong fast. The triage nurse hissed under her breath, "Mara." Mara lifted one hand slightly without looking back. A tiny signal, not defiance, communication. "Wait." The giant's chest rose and fell heavy. He leaned forward, towering over her like a storm cloud. "I'm not stepping back," he said. "I'm not waiting. They told me this place helps people, so help me." Mara nodded once. "We will, but if you keep moving toward staff, security will restrain you and that will delay your care. I don't want that." His eyes narrowed. "You think you can restrain me?" Mara's gaze flicked, just briefly, to his left side. To the way his weight wasn't even, to the subtle hitch in his hip, to the faint trembling in his fingers that wasn't anger, it was strain. Then she looked back up. "I don't think," she said. "I assess." The giant's jaw flexed. He took another step forward anyway. A mistake, not because Mara was brave. Because she was ready. It happened so fast it felt like the room blinked. Mara shifted sideways, her hand catching his wrist as he reached, maybe to grab the counter, maybe to grab someone. She rotated her body, not her arms, using his forward momentum like it belonged to her. Her other hand pressed at a point near his elbow, precise, not brutal, and the giant's entire posture collapsed like someone had unplugged him. He dropped to one knee. A gasp rippled through the waiting room. The security guard froze mid-step, stunned. The giant tried to rise, but Mara was already behind him, her forearm braced across his shoulder line, not choking, not striking, controlling, anchoring. "Breathe," she said, voice still level. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. You're not dying in this lobby." The giant's face contorted, half rage, half disbelief, and then something else. Fear, because he couldn't overpower what she'd done. Not without hurting himself worse. And he knew it. Mara leaned close enough that only he could hear. "You want to be treated like a patient," she murmured. Then act like one. For a heartbeat, the whole ER was silent except for the monitors and the rain against the glass. And that's when the room changed. Pause. If you're the kind of person who loves stories where calm competence cuts through chaos, and where the people who underestimate someone end up swallowing their pride, tap like right now. It tells me you want more of these long, cinematic justice stories, and it helps me keep bringing you the next one without breaking the tone of what you're watching. The giant, later we'd learn his name was Darius Kane, stayed on one knee breathing hard, eyes wide. Not from pain, from the shock of being redirected by someone he'd written off as nothing. Myra released pressure slowly, the way you defuse a bomb without jostling it. Stand up, she said, but do it slowly. He hesitated. Mara's gaze flicked to security. Sir, step back, I've got him. The guard, Eddie, looked relieved to have permission not to escalate. He backed off, palms open. Darius rose to his feet, towering again, but his hands were down now. His shoulders sagged. Myra nodded toward triage. We're going to get you a room, but you're going to answer questions first. Can you do that? Darius stared at her like she'd just rewritten the rules of gravity. Then he gave a stiff nod. Yes, he muttered. Yeah, fine. Myra turned slightly toward the triage nurse, a woman named Denise who'd worked emergency longer than Myra had been alive. Denise's eyes were sharp, skeptical, protective. Denise didn't like new people, not because she was mean, because she'd seen what happens when untested hands get in the way. Denise pointed her pen. Mara, you're not primary on triage. Mara's tone didn't change. He needs a bed now. His gait is uneven, his hands are trembling, and he's pale under that flush. If we keep him in the lobby, he'll escalate again. Put him in 3. Denise's lips pressed into a line. Then she glanced at Darius and saw what Mara saw. Not a monster. A man barely holding himself together. Denise exhaled. Room 3, Eddie escort Mara. I'll take him, Mara said. Denise's eyebrows lifted. You're on MedSurg rotation, you're not. I'm capable, Mara said quietly. And Denise reluctantly let her. That was the culture at St. Brigid's Medical Center in Providence, Rhode Island. Competence mattered, but hierarchy mattered more. And Mara Calder, 26, nurse residency patch on her badge, was not supposed to be capable in a way that made people uncomfortable. Especially not in a way that made senior staff look slow. Pause. St. Brigid's sat between downtown Providence and the older neighborhoods where triple-deckers leaned close together and the streetlights hummed in the fog. It wasn't the biggest hospital in the state, but it was busy, and it was proud of its ER. Busy meant sharp. Proud meant territorial. The ER had its own ecosystem. The physicians, the charge nurses, the techs, the paramedics, they moved like a pack that had survived too many nights together. Outsiders were tolerated. Newcomers were tested. Myra had been there 6 months, long enough to know where the supplies were, long enough to know which doctors snapped and which ones taught, long enough to learn that her presence made one person especially unhappy. Nurse manager Lyle Mercer. Mercer was the kind of man who smiled when supervisors walked by and turned his face into a blank wall when they left. He wasn't a doctor, he wasn't even clinically strong. But he controlled scheduling, evaluations, and whether a resident nurse fit the culture. That gave him power, and he treated it like a weapon he could hold without getting his hands dirty. He had a favorite phrase, perception matters, which was his way of saying, I don't care what you did. I care who saw it and how it made me look. Mercer didn't like Mara because she didn't perform nervousness for him. When he corrected her in front of others, she didn't blush. She didn't stammer. She said, understood, and kept moving. When he implied she wasn't ready, she didn't beg. She improved. That kind of quiet competence, especially from a rookie, made insecure people furious. And Mercer had been furious since day one. Because Myra didn't come from the usual pipeline. Most of the nurse residents at St. Brigid's were local graduates. Some had family in the system. Myra came from out of state. Her file was thin. Her references were formal and oddly worded, and her emergency skills, while she claimed she'd never worked ER, were too clean. It wasn't just Mercer who noticed. The veteran paramedics had started watching her when she thought no one was looking. The way she positioned her body in a room, the way she spoke to agitated patients, the way she read a monitor as if the numbers were a language she'd grown up speaking. She moved like someone who'd been trained under pressure. But she never bragged, she never explained. She just did the work. And in a place like that, unexplained competence was suspicious. Pause. Room 3 was small, the walls painted a hospital blue that tried and failed to be calming. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. The air smelled like antiseptic and damp fabric. Darius Kane sat on the edge of the bed, hoodie still dripping onto the sheet. He looked even larger sitting down, like the room had been designed for normal human beings, and he'd wandered into it by mistake. Mara stood near the doorway, leaving him space. "I need your name and date of birth," she said. He hesitated. Darius Kane, August 15th, 91. Mara wrote it down. "What brings you here tonight, Darius?" He rubbed his hand over his face. His fingers shook. I can't get my breath right," he said, voice quieter now. "My chest feels like someone's sitting on it, and my hands keep doing this." He held them up. The tremor was visible. Mara nodded. "Any substances, alcohol, stimulants?" Darius bristled. "No." Mara didn't react to the defensiveness. "Any injuries today? Falls, hits, heavy exertion?" He swallowed. "I was working warehouse, lifting, then it started, thought it was nothing, then it got worse." Mara's eyes moved over him. Skin color, sweat, breathing pattern, posture. "Any history of heart problems?" she asked. Darius's jaw tightened. "No, but my dad dropped dead at 48. Mara's pen paused for half a beat. Then she nodded once. "Okay." She stepped closer, not too close, and held out the blood pressure cuff. "I'm going to take your vitals," she said. "I need your arm." Darius stared at her like he was still trying to understand what had happened in the lobby. "You did something to me," he said. Myra met his eyes. "I redirected you. You were about to make a choice that would hurt you and hurt other people. I stopped it." Darius's throat moved. "How?" Myra wrapped the cuff with practiced speed. "You leaned forward with your weight on your front foot. Your hip is strained on the left side. You weren't balanced. I used leverage." "That's not normal nurse stuff," he muttered. Myra's expression didn't change. "It's normal for someone who wants everyone to go home safe." The machine inflated. The numbers popped up high enough to make even Darius's eyes widen. Myra didn't show alarm, but her tone sharpened. "Darius, I'm going to put you on a monitor," she said, "and I'm going to get a doctor now." He grabbed her wrist, not hard, but urgent. His hand swallowed her forearm. Myra didn't pull away, she didn't flinch. "What if it's bad?" he whispered. For the first time, his voice wasn't anger. It was a child's fear wearing an adult body. Myra placed her other hand lightly over his knuckles, steady, controlled. "We're already doing the right thing," she said, "and you're going to keep breathing in, out, that's your job." Darius stared at her. Then he released her wrist. Myra stepped out and called for an EKG. Pause. "If you're locked in right now, comment one word for me. Calm. Not because it's a gimmick, but because that single word captures the difference between chaos and control in a room like this. And it lets me know you want more stories where the quiet person ends up being the most dangerous, in the best possible way." The doctor assigned to room 3 was Dr. Nina Sato, early 40s, sharp eyes, hair pulled back, the kind of physician who didn't waste words because she didn't need them. She walked in with Mara and a tech, glanced at the monitor, glanced at Darius, then at Mara. "What happened in triage?" Dr. Sato asked. Mara answered simply, "He was escalating, I de-escalated." Dr. Sato's eyes narrowed slightly, not buying the simplicity. "How?" Mara didn't lie. "Leverage control," he complied. Dr. Sato didn't press yet. She moved to Darius. "Mr. Kane," she said, "I'm Dr. Sato. We're going to run tests. You're having chest pressure and tremors. We're going to make sure your heart is okay and your electrolytes aren't off." Darius nodded stiffly. Dr. Sato turned to Mara. "Get labs, CBC, CMP, troponin, magnesium, and chest X-ray." Mara was already moving. "Yes, doctor." As she left, she caught a glimpse down the hall. Nurse manager Mercer stood by the nurse station, arms crossed, watching room 3 like it was a stage, and Mara had stepped into the spotlight without permission. His smile was thin, the kind of smile that said, "I saw that, and I'm going to make you pay for it later." Myra didn't slow down, but she felt it. She felt it since her first week. The subtle digs, the scheduled changes, the whispered comments when she walked by. "Try hard. Robot. Thinks she's special." And the worst one, said with a laugh by someone who didn't know Mara could hear. "Bet she's ex-military or something. Those ones always have a chip." They weren't entirely wrong. But they didn't know the truth. And Mercer, if he ever learned it, would lose his mind. Pause. Darius's tests moved quickly, because high blood pressure plus chest pressure plus family history meant nobody wanted to gamble. Myra returned with the phlebotomy kit and supplies for an IV, and Darius watched her like he was looking for cracks in her calm. "You always talk like that?" he asked as she cleaned his arm. "Like what?" Myra asked. Like you're not impressed by anything." Myra slid the needle in smoothly. "I'm impressed by plenty, I just don't show it when someone needs steadiness." Darius snorted, then winced as another wave of discomfort hit him. Myra taped the IV and looked at him. "On a scale of 1 to 10, she asked, "how bad is the chest pressure right now?" Darius swallowed. 7. Myra nodded once and stepped to the monitor, checking his rhythm. It was fast, not chaotic but stressed. Dr. Sato returned, scanning the EKG printout. "No obvious SDEMI," she said, "but we're not done." Darius's eyes darted. "What does that mean?" "It means we don't see the big heart attack pattern," Dr. Sato said, "but we're still taking you seriously." Darius's breathing sped up and Mara saw it, the start of panic, the spiral. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Darius," she said, "look at me." He did, eyes wide. Myra held his gaze. "You're not alone in this room, you're not going to white-knuckle it. Breathe with me." She demonstrated, slow inhale, slow exhale. Darius tried to follow. It took 3 breaths before his shoulders dropped a fraction. Dr. Sato watched Myra for a moment, then looked away, but the slight change in her posture said it all. She was clocking something. Not just that Myra was good. That Myra was unusual. Pause. The ER didn't pause for one patient, even a 7-foot giant. In the next bay, a child with asthma coughed into a nebulizer mask, eyes tired. A woman with a fractured wrist cried quietly while her boyfriend argued about the wait time. 2 paramedics rolled in an elderly man with altered mental status, and the charge nurse barked orders like a conductor. Mara floated between tasks, focused and precise. But Mercer followed her with his eyes. Mercer didn't like attention he didn't control. And tonight, attention was drifting toward the rookie, who had dropped a giant in the lobby without laying a punch, without escalating, without drama. It made Mercer feel small. And Mercer hated feeling small. He waited until Myra stepped out of room 3 to print labels at the station. He moved in beside her, close enough that his voice could stay low. "Interesting performance out there," he said. Myra didn't look at him. It wasn't a performance, it was safety. Mercer chuckled softly. Safety is everyone's job, but stepping out of scope is risky. Myra finally met his eyes. De-escalation is within nursing scope, so is protecting staff. Mercer's smile tightened. "It's not your role to physically control patients." "I didn't injure him," Myra said, "and he's calmer now, which is better for his care." Mercer leaned in a fraction, voice like syrup over glass. "Perception matters," he said, and what people perceived was a brand new nurse getting physical with a patient in the lobby. Myra's jaw set. People perceived a patient being stopped from harming himself and others. Mercer's eyes hardened. "We'll see what administration perceives, especially if the patient complains." Mara's gaze didn't waver. "If he complains, I'll document exactly what happened." Mercer's mouth twitched. "Document all you want, I decide what gets elevated." Then he walked away, leaving Mara with the printer's soft mechanical whir and a familiar heat in her chest. Not fear. Restraint. Because Mara Calder had learned, long before St. Brigid's, that some people don't attack you with fists. They attack your credibility. And if they win that, you can do everything right and still lose. Pause. Dr. Sato returned to room 3 with lab results on her tablet. Darius sat rigid, hands clasped to keep them from trembling. His hoodie was off now, revealing a gray t-shirt stretched across his chest. Sweat beaded at his temples. Dr. Sato's expression was controlled. Mr. Kane, your cardiac enzymes are not elevated. That's good. Darius blinked, so I'm fine. Not necessarily, Dr. Sato said. Your blood pressure is dangerously high and your potassium is low. That can cause tremors, palpitations, and chest discomfort. We're going to correct it and monitor you. Darius's shoulders sagged with relief, then tightened again. Why is my potassium low? Dr. Sato glanced at Mara. Diet, diuretics, vomiting. Darius hesitated. I've been taking these supplements for workouts. Mara's eyes narrowed slightly. Stimulants. Darius shook his head too fast. No, just energy stuff. Dr. Sato's tone sharpened. Bring them in, or tell us exactly what's in them. Darius looked ashamed. It's just, guys at the warehouse take them, helps you keep up. Mara didn't judge, she just nodded. We'll treat what's happening, Mara said, and then we'll talk about preventing it. Darius stared at her. You talk like you've seen this before. Mara paused. Just a breath. Then she said, I've seen bodies pushed past their limit. Yes. It wasn't an answer. It was a breadcrumb. And Darius noticed it. So did Dr. Sato. Pause. If you're enjoying the slow burn mystery of who Myra really is, and you want the moment when everyone in that ER realizes they picked the wrong person to underestimate, hit subscribe. You'll get the next story the moment it drops, and I promise the payoff always lands. By midnight, the rain outside had softened into a steady drizzle. The ER lights made the wet parking lot shine like black glass. Darius's vitals stabilized slowly with IV fluids and electrolyte replacement. His breathing eased, his hands steadied. He wasn't out of the woods, but he wasn't a walking explosion anymore. And that's when the second crisis rolled in. Not loud at first, not dramatic, just a call over the ambulance radio that made the charge nurse straighten. Incoming, the paramedic voice crackled through. Male, mid-50s, collapse at private event, unresponsive initially, regained briefly, now altered, suspected cardiac, ETA 3 minutes. The charge nurse, Denise, snapped into motion. Trauma Bay 1, get respiratory, get crash cart. Dr. Sato, you're up. Mara felt the air shift. The ER had a rhythm and incoming cardiac cases changed the beat. People moved faster, voices clipped, equipment rolled. Mercer appeared again, materializing near the station like a shadow that liked emergencies because they created opportunities to blame. Denise pointed at Mara. Calder, you're with me. You're running meds if we need them. Mercer's head turned sharply. She's not. Denise cut him off. She's with me. Mercer's lips pressed thin, but he didn't argue with Denise in front of everyone. Not yet. Mara followed Denise into Trauma Bay 1. The room smelled of plastic and metal. Bright lights overhead. A bed in the center surrounded by monitors, oxygen, suction, and the crash cart like a silent threat. Mara checked the med drawer, laid out syringes, and prepared like she'd done it 100 times. Denise watched her hands. You ever done a code? She asked. Mara didn't look up. Yes. Denise's eyes narrowed. Here. No, Mara said. That was all. But Denise heard the confidence, the certainty. And Denise didn't like mysteries. She liked proof. Pause. The ambulance doors burst open, and the paramedics rushed in, pushing a gurney fast enough that the wheels rattled. The patient was dressed in a suit, shirt collar loosened, face pale. 2 EMTs flanked him, one bagging oxygen. Name, Denise demanded. Paramedic answered, Victor Holloway. Mara's eyes flicked to the name, and she felt something in her gut tighten. Not because she knew him personally, because she recognized the kind of name that came with consequences. The paramedic continued, collapsed at a charity gala at the Omni, briefly regained consciousness, complained of chest pressure, then went out again, pulse present but weak, BP was low, we started fluids. Dr. Sato moved to the head of the bed. Get him on the monitor. Mara's hands moved fast. Leads placed, IV checked, oxygen adjusted. The monitor beeped an uneven rhythm. Not flatline, but not stable. Dr. Sato leaned in. Victor, can you hear me? Victor's eyelids fluttered. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Denise called pressure. Tech read it out, 80/50. Denise cursed under her breath. Dr. Sato looked at Mara. Get me epi ready and have atropine available. Mara nodded, already drawing the medication. Mercer hovered at the doorway, watching like a man who wanted to be seen witnessing. Denise barked at him, if you're not helping, get out. Mercer lifted his hands in mock innocence, just making sure protocols are followed. Mara didn't look at him. She focused on Victor. His skin was cool, his breathing shallow, his pupils sluggish. And then Victor's rhythm shifted, an alarm tone warbled. Dr. Sato's voice sharpened. He's dropping. Denise shouted, pulse check. Hands moved, silence. No pulse, Denise said, and the words hit the room like a hammer. Start compressions, Dr. Sato ordered. A tech climbed on the stool and began chest compressions, steady and hard. The monitor screamed. Mara held the epi syringe ready, eyes on Dr. Sato. Epi, Dr. Sato snapped. Mara stepped in, pushed the medication, flushed the line. And then something happened that nobody expected. Victor's eyes opened. Wide, focused. For half a second, he looked directly at Mara. And his lips moved. He whispered something. Mara leaned in without thinking. His voice was barely air, but the words landed like a secret passed in a war zone. Calder. Mara froze for a fraction of a heartbeat. Not because he knew her name from the chart. Because of how he said it. Like he recognized her. Like he'd been waiting for her. And Denise saw Mara's micro-freeze. Dr. Sato saw it too. Mercer, from the doorway, leaned forward like a shark smelling blood. Pause. If you're catching tea. Hose tiny breadcrumbs, the ones that make you ask, how does this high-status guy know the rookie nurse? Go ahead and tap like. It's the clearest sign you want stories that don't just sprint to the ending, but earn the reveal with details that click into place later. The code continued. Compressions, ventilations, medications, rhythm checks. The room moved in a practice dance, but tension threaded through it. Because Victor Holloway wasn't just a patient. Within 2 minutes, someone's phone buzzed at the nurse station. A whisper traveled fast. State official. Hospital board. Major donor. When high-status patients come in, the medical care doesn't change. But the politics do. And politics was Mercer's favorite language. He slipped out and made a call. Mara didn't notice, she was too focused. Dr. Sato ordered another round, check rhythm. They paused compressions. The monitor showed a rhythm again, weak but present. Denise pressed at Victor's neck, pulses back. A collective exhale filled the room. But Victor's pressure was still low, his breathing unstable. Dr. Sato spoke quickly. We need ICU, prepare for intubation if he drops again. Denise nodded, respiratory, get ready. Mara stayed by the medication drawer, hands steady. Then Victor's eyes opened again, fluttering. He turned his head slightly toward Mara, like she was the only anchor in the room. And again his lips moved. Mara leaned in. This time she heard it clearer. Tell him I'm here. Mara's chest tightened. Tell who? Victor's gaze flicked toward the doorway, toward the hall beyond. Director, he whispered. Then his eyes rolled back and he drifted again. Mara stood frozen for one breath. Director. That wasn't a doctor title. That sounded like command. Denise touched Mara's shoulder. Calder, you okay? Mara blinked, and her professional mask slid back into place. Yes, she said, I'm okay. But inside, something had shifted. Because the past had just reached into the present and grabbed her by the wrist. And she knew, deep down, that tonight wasn't just going to be about an agitated giant in the lobby. Tonight was going to drag her secrets into the light. Pause. Mercer returned 10 minutes later with a different posture. Satisfied. Like he'd placed a bet and could already see the payout. He approached Denise near the station. Administration is on their way down, he said. Denise frowned. For what? Mercer's eyes flicked to Mara. For Mr. Holloway, and for an incident report. I think we need to address what happened earlier in the lobby before it becomes a liability. Mara kept labeling meds, not looking up. Denise's voice went cold. We don't do politics during a code, Mercer. Mercer smiled. We do risk management at all times. He turned toward Mara. Calder, I'll need you in my office after this. You'll write a statement. Mara's voice was even. I already documented objective charting. Mercer's smile didn't reach his eyes. You'll write what I ask. This is serious. Denise stepped closer, blocking him slightly. Back off, she's working. Mercer's face hardened, but he backed away. He wasn't done. He was just waiting for a cleaner moment to strike. Pause. Darius, meanwhile, had stabilized enough to be moved to observation, but he refused to leave. He'd overheard commotion through the curtain and the open door. He'd seen Mara move in and out, calm as the storm outside. When a tech came to wheel him down the hall, Darius shook his head. Nah, he said, I'm staying here. The tech looked confused. Sir, you're going to OBS. Darius leaned forward. I said I'm staying, I'm not leaving that nurse. The tech glanced at Mara, who was charting quickly between tasks. Mara looked up. Darius, you need monitoring. Observation is safer for you. Darius's eyes were stubborn. So is you. Mara held his gaze for a moment, then nodded once, the smallest nod. I'll come check on you, she promised. Darius's shoulders loosened. Promise. I don't say things I can't do, Mara replied. Darius let them wheel him out. But as he left, he looked back at Mercer, who stood near the station watching Mara like a man waiting to pull a trigger. Darius didn't know what Mercer was. But he knew the type. And he didn't like it. Pause. If you've ever had someone in authority try to twist the story when you did the right thing, you already feel what's coming. Drop a comment with truth. If you want to see justice handled the realistic way, documentation, witnesses, and consequences that actually stick. The shift kept grinding forward. Victor Holloway was transferred to ICU with a fragile stability. Dr. Sato finally stepped out, rubbing her temple. Denise leaned against the counter, exhausted but alert. Mara cleaned her hands at the sink, the water hot, the sound steady. Mercer approached again, this time not smiling at all. Office, he said. Mara dried her hands. Now. Yes, Mercer said. Now. Denise started to speak, but Mercer cut her off. This is managerial. It concerns staff conduct. Denise's eyes flashed. It concerns patient safety. That's my domain, too. Mercer leaned in, voice low and sharp. Denise, you're not her mother. Stay in your lane. Denise's jaw clenched. Mara touched Denise's arm briefly, a calming gesture. It's okay, Mara said. Denise looked like she wanted to argue, but Mara's calm was contagious. Reluctantly, Denise stepped back. Mara followed Mercer down the hall to his office. It was small, windowless, with a framed values of care poster on the wall that felt like a joke. Mercer closed the door and gestured to a chair like he was doing her a favor. Mara didn't sit. Mercer's eyes narrowed. Sit. Mara's voice was steady. I prefer to stand. Mercer exhaled sharply, then opened a folder on his desk. I have multiple staff statements, he said, that you used force on a patient in the lobby. Mara's gaze didn't change. I used control to prevent harm, minimal force, no injury, patient was escalated. Mercer tapped the folder. That's your interpretation. It's the objective sequence, Mara said. Mercer leaned back. Do you know what the optics are, Mara? A brand new nurse putting hands on a patient. If this goes external, we look like we train staff to assault people. Mara's eyes hardened slightly. We train staff to keep people safe. Mercer's lips curled. We train staff to follow policy, and policy says security handles physical interventions. Mara's tone stayed calm. Policy also says we use least restrictive interventions to prevent harm when immediate danger exists. Mercer stared at her for a long beat. Then he smiled again. Not friendly. Predatory. You know what else policy says? He asked. That falsifying credentials or omitting relevant history is grounds for termination. Myra's throat tightened almost imperceptibly. Mercer noticed. He leaned forward. Your file is interesting, he said. Sparse, strange references, no detailed prior employment listed. You know what that looks like to HR. Myra held his gaze. It looks like a nurse-resident file. Mercer shook his head slowly. It looks like someone hiding something. Myra didn't answer. Mercer slid a paper across the desk. You're going to sign this acknowledgement of counseling. You're being written up for unprofessional conduct and unsafe physical interaction with a patient. Myra stared at the paper. A write-up didn't just sting. It followed you. It shaped your evaluations, your future jobs, your credibility. Mercer wanted to stain her record, make her easier to remove later. Myra exhaled slowly. I'm not signing that, she said. Mercer's smile vanished. You don't get to refuse. Myra's voice was quiet but immovable. I do, and I'll write my own statement. Mercer's eyes sharpened. If you don't sign, I can place you on administrative leave pending investigation. Myra nodded once, then do it. Mercer blinked, caught off guard. Most people begged. Most people panicked. Myra didn't. And that made Mercer furious. Fine, he snapped. Administrative leave effective immediately, badge on the desk. Myra's hand moved to her badge clip. For a half-second, she paused. Not because she was scared. Because she was measuring consequences. Then she unclipped it and set it down. Mercer's eyes gleamed with victory. Good choice, he said. Myra looked at him, calm as ever. It wasn't a choice, it was your decision, and it will be reviewed. Mercer laughed. By who? You think anyone's coming to save you? Myra didn't answer. Because she wasn't sure. But somewhere upstairs in ICU, Victor Holloway had whispered, tell the director. And Myra knew exactly who that was. Pause. Myra walked out of Mercer's office without her badge, without her radio, without even her clipboard. Just a woman in scrubs, suddenly stripped of authority in the place she'd been holding together. The hallway felt colder. Denise saw her immediately and stood up. What did he do? Myra's voice stayed even. He put me on administrative leave. Denise's face went pale with rage. For what? For the lobby, Myra said, and for refusing to sign his write-up. Denise took a step toward Mercer's office like she was going to kick the door in. Myra caught her arm. Denise, don't, not like that. Denise turned, eyes wet with fury. You saved that man from hurting someone. You saved a code tonight, and he. Myra's expression softened slightly. This isn't about what I did, it's about what he wants. Denise swallowed hard. What does he want? Myra's gaze flicked down the hall, toward ICU, toward the politics that had just rolled into their ER. I think, Myra said quietly, he wants me gone before someone important recognizes me. Denise stared at her. Recognizes you from where? Myra didn't answer. She couldn't. Not yet. But Denise felt the weight of the unspoken, and she realized something that made her skin prickle. Myra wasn't just talented. Myra was connected. And Mercer had just stepped on a landmine without realizing it. The ICU doors opened with a soft hiss that felt too polite for what was happening behind them. Myra stood in the hallway outside the elevator bank, her badge gone, her hands empty, her scrub pockets suddenly too light. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the air had that cold, recycled smell hospitals always carried at night, clean, exhausted, and slightly metallic. Denise had marched off to the charge desk to pull the staffing log and incident reports, muttering about paper trails and witnesses. She was angry enough to chew through drywall. Myra wasn't angry. Not outwardly. Outwardly, she looked like she always did, still controlled, eyes forward. But inside, her mind was working through a checklist. If Mercer escalated this to HR tonight, He'd frame it as uncontrolled aggression. If the patient complained, Mercer would call it assault. If administration got wind of it without context, Mara would be a risk. And if her history got dragged up the wrong way, it wouldn't just be her job. It would be her life. She reached into her pocket and felt the edge of her phone. One call. One name. She hated making that call, because it meant admitting she couldn't fix this with pure competence and documentation. But Victor Holloway's whisper kept replaying in her head. Tell the director. Myra stepped into the stairwell for privacy. The door shut behind her with a heavy thunk, cutting off the ER noise like a curtain dropping. She dialed. It rang once, twice, then a voice answered, low and steady, like it had been awake for hours already. Calder. Myra closed her eyes for a brief second. He hadn't said hello. He'd said her name. Yes, sir, she said quietly. A pause on the line, then, where are you? St. Brigid's Medical Center, Myra replied. Providence. Another pause, the faint sound of a keyboard, maybe, or a pen tapping once. I didn't know you were in Rhode Island, the man said. I wasn't supposed to be, Myra answered. A silence that wasn't empty, a silence that meant the man was processing the shape of the problem. Then he said, talk to me. Myra took a slow breath. High-status patient came in, she said. Victor Holloway, he coded, came back, he recognized me, whispered for you. The line went still. Then the man's voice sharpened just slightly. Holloway is at St. Brigid S. Yes, sir. And you're on that floor. I was, Mara said. I've been placed on administrative leave. Nurse manager claims I used force on a patient in the lobby. He's setting me up. The man didn't ask for emotions. He asked for facts. Patient injured, he said. No, Mara answered. Witnesses, he asked. Yes. Documentation, he said. Yes. A beat. Stay where you are, the man said. Do not leave the hospital. Mara's chest tightened. Sir. Stay, he repeated, and don't speak to HR alone. The call ended. Myra stared at her phone. Her hands were steady, but her heart thudded once heavy, because she knew that voice. Director Adrian Voss. And when Adrian Voss said stay, it meant one thing. Authority was coming. Pause. If you want the moment when Mercer realizes his little write-up just collided with someone who doesn't answer to hospital politics, hit subscribe right now. You're already deep in the story, and you don't want to miss the part where quiet competence meets real authority, and the whole room has to adjust. Mara left the stairwell and returned to the ER corridor, posture unchanged, as if she'd simply gone to wash her hands. But Denise was waiting near the station, eyes blazing. I pulled the logs, Denise said, voice tight. You weren't out of line. You were the only one who stepped in before Eddie even got his radio up. Mara nodded, thank you. Denise stared at her for a second. Who did you call? Mara didn't answer directly. Someone who can request an impartial review. Denise's eyebrows shot up. Impartial review at midnight. Mara's eyes flicked to the hallway leading to ICU. He'll come. Denise studied Mara's face, searching for the first time she'd ever seen her crack. Denise found nothing, but she did see something else. Certainty. And certainty in a hospital was usually reserved for people at the very top. Pause. An hour passed. Then another's. The ER cycled through the usual chaos. A drunken fall, a feverish elderly woman, a migraine that had lasted for days. The night shift did what it always did, absorbed the city's pain and tried to organize it into something treatable. Mercer, meanwhile, moved like a man preparing a stage. He made copies, he printed policy excerpts, he drafted an email to HR. He spoke in hushed tones to a young administrator in a blazer who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Mara stayed near T. He edge of the station, technically no longer staff, but not asked to leave because the situation was pending. It was a weird limbo hospitals created when they wanted to control a narrative before they let you walk out. Darius, down in observation, kept asking for her. Every time a tech walked by, he'd say, "Where's the nurse? The calm one." Finally, he pushed himself upright and shuffled to the OBS doorway, tall enough to see over the curtains. When he spotted Myra at the station, he called out, loud enough that half the hall heard. "Yo, rookie." Heads turned. Myra looked up. Darius pointed toward Mercer. "That guy messing with you." Mercer's face flushed. Mara's voice stayed even. "Go back to bed, Darius." Darius didn't move. "Answer me." Mara held his gaze. "Yes." Darius's jaw clenched. He looked around at the watching staff and families, and his voice dropped lower but still carried. "I saw what you did for me," he said. "You kept me from doing something stupid. You didn't hurt me. You helped me." Mercer snapped. "Sir, return to your bed. This is a staff matter." Darius turned his head slowly toward Mercer, like a large animal deciding whether something was a threat. "Staff matter," Darius repeated. "You mean you're trying to get her in trouble?" Mercer's smile was thin and practiced. "I'm ensuring safety protocols." Darius cut him off. "You weren't ensuring anything when I walked in. You were behind the desk watching me scare people." Mercer's eyes widened. "That's inappropriate." Darius stepped closer, and the hallway seemed to shrink around his size. Mara's voice sharpened just enough to slice. "Darius, back." Darius froze mid-step. Not because Mercer told him. Because Mara did. And the watching staff clocked it. This 7-foot giant listened to the rookie like she had an invisible leash. Darius exhaled hard, then took one step back. "Fine," he muttered. Then, still looking at Mercer, he added, "But you better not lie about her." Mercer's jaw worked, but he couldn't risk escalating Darius again in public. So Mercer did what petty power always does. He waited. Pause. At 3:17 a.m., the elevators at the end of the hall opened with a soft chime. No one noticed at first, because it was the ER and elevators opened constantly. Then the air changed. Not from sound. From attention. 2 men stepped out first in dark coats, scanning the corridor with the calm alertness of people trained to see threats without creating them. Not police uniforms, not hospital security. Something else. Behind them walked a third man, tall but not imposing in a showy way. Mid-40s, clean-shaven, hair cut short, suit under a heavy coat like he'd come straight from a long drive. His eyes were the kind that didn't flicker. They assessed. They remembered. He didn't hurry, but everyone instinctively moved out of his path, as if the hallway itself recognized him. Denise straightened at the station. Dr. Sato, who'd come back down for a consult, paused mid-sip of coffee. Mercer stepped forward with that practiced smile, smoothing his tie like he was about to greet a donor. "Good morning," Mercer said brightly. "Can I help you?" The man didn't even glance at Mercer's smile. His gaze went past him, straight to Mara. And for the first time all night, Mara's calm mask shifted, just a millimeter. Not fear. Respect. She lowered her chin slightly, a gesture that looked like nothing to most people. But to a certain kind of person, it meant everything. "Yes, Director," Mara said. Mercer blinked. "Director." The man finally looked at Mercer. His voice was quiet, but it carried authority like gravity. "Adrian Voss," he said. "Federal Clinical Oversight and Emergency Preparedness. I'm here for Victor Halloway." Mercer's smile faltered. Denise's eyes widened. Dr. Sato set her coffee down slowly. And somewhere down the hall, a patient's call bell chimed, totally unaware that the power dynamic in this ER had just been rewritten. Pause. If you've been waiting for the authority enters moment, the one where someone credible walks in and the whole room suddenly has to tell the truth, tap-like. These are the scenes that make the payoff hit harder, because now nobody can hide behind vague accusations. Mercer recovered fast. He always did. "Director Voss," Mercer said warmly, extending his hand. "I'm Lyle Mercer, nurse manager. Welcome to St. Brigid's. We're honored." Voss didn't take his hand. Not rudely. Just not at all. He looked at the nurse station, then at Dr. Sato. "Who's the attending on Halloway?" Voss asked. Dr. Sato stepped forward, composed. "Dr. Nina Sato. I see you took him, but I led the initial code in Trauma 1. Voss nodded. I want a brief clinical rundown, and then I want to speak with the staff member who initiated medication sequence during the code. Mercer jumped in. Our team performed admirably, but I do need to inform you there's an ongoing investigation in VO. Elving, one of our nurse residents. Voss lifted one finger. Not a dramatic gesture. A simple pause command. Mercer stopped mid-sentence like his voice had hit glass. Voss turned his eyes to Myra again. Myra Calder, he said. Yes, sir, she replied. Mercer's mouth fell open. You know her. Voss didn't answer Mercer. He spoke to Myra. Are you currently employed on shift? He asked. Myra's voice stayed level. I was removed from duty by Manager Mercer, administrative leave pending. Voss's eyes didn't change, but the temperature in his gaze dropped. On what grounds? He asked. Mercer forced a laugh. It's a routine matter. She used physical force on a patient in triage. It's a liability issue and... Voss looked at Mercer, as if Mercer had just suggested something embarrassingly small. I didn't ask you for interpretation, Voss said. I asked for grounds. Mercer's face reddened. Unprofessional conduct, unsafe physical intervention, possible misrepresentation of credentials. That last phrase hung in the air like a dirty trick. Denise's head snapped toward Mercer, furious. Mara didn't react, but Dr. Sato's eyes sharpened. Voss turned slightly, addressing the ER as a whole. I'll need every witness statement related to the lobby incident, he said. Security footage, documentation, and I'll need a quiet room where I can speak with involved staff. Now. Mercer tried to smile again. Of course, we're happy to cooperate. Our administration will. Voss cut him off without raising his voice. You will cooperate, he said. Administration will observe. Pause. They moved to a small conference room off the main hall, the kind with a cheap oval table and chairs that squeaked. Mercer sat at one side, posture rigid. Denise sat beside Myra, arms crossed like a guard dog. Dr. Sato stood near the door, not officially part of the meeting, but unwilling to leave. Voss sat at the head of the table like he belonged there more than anyone. His two associates remained standing behind him, silent. Voss opened a thin folder, his own, not Mercer's. That alone made Mercer's neck stiffen. Let's establish facts, Voss said calmly. At approximately 11:02 p.m., an agitated patient entered triage. Patient Darius Kane, correct. Denise nodded, yes. Voss looked at Mercer. Security was present. Yes, Mercer said. Officer Eddie Ramirez. Voss nodded once. Video exists. Mercer hesitated. Our cameras. Denise cut in. Yes, cameras in triage and hallway. Voss looked at Myra. Calder, did you physically touch the patient? Yes, Myra said. Mercer leaned forward like he'd caught her. There, admission. Voss held up a hand again. Mercer stopped. Voss's eyes stayed on Myra. Describe. Myra spoke with the exact cadence of clinical reporting. Patient advanced toward staff counter, hands raised, verbal aggression escalating. Security had not made contact. I assessed immediate risk of harm to staff and patient. I used a leverage control technique to redirect his momentum and bring him to a controlled kneeling position. No strikes. No pressure to airway. Patient complied. No injury. Voss nodded slightly, as if confirming something he already knew. Dr. Sato's eyebrows lifted. She glanced at Denise. Denise looked smug, like she'd been waiting for someone official to hear the truth. Mercer forced a laugh. Leverage control technique, that's precisely the issue. She's a nurse resident, not security. Where did she learn that? Voss didn't even blink. That's your concern, he asked. Mercer sputtered. It's a legitimate question if she has unreported training. Voss leaned forward, voice still calm. If she prevented an injury, your concern should be why security and triage protocols did not de-escalate before it reached that point, he said. Not where a competent nurse learned competence. Mercer's face tightened. We cannot have staff freelancing. Voss turned his eyes toward Denise. Was anyone harmed? No, Denise said. She prevented harm. Voss turned to Dr. Sato. In your professional medical opinion, did her actions delay care? Dr. Sato answered without hesitation. No, they expedited care. Patient was stabilized, assessed, and treated more quickly because he complied afterward. Mercer's jaw worked, but optics. Voss's voice cut through him. Enough, he said. Mercer went silent. And that's when the room changed again. Because Mercer realized he wasn't in charge of the narrative anymore. Pause. Voss sat back slightly and looked at Mara. Why are you here, Calder? He asked. The question was simple, but everyone in that room felt the weight behind it. Denise frowned. She's in our nurse residency. Voss's eyes stayed on Mara. I'm asking her. Mara held his gaze. Because you told me to disappear, she said quietly. And I did, until I could serve without the past interfering. Denise's mouth parted slightly. Dr. Sato's eyes narrowed, curious. Mercer low. Oaked confused, then alarmed. Voss nodded once, as if the answer fit. Victor Holloway is in ICU, Voss said. He requested me, he recognized you. Mercer seized on that. Exactly, that's a conflict. Why would a state-level official recognize a nurse resident unless? Voss looked at Mercer like Mercer was a noise he could turn off. Mr. Mercer, Voss said, you're going to stop speculating. Mercer tried to protest. I'm responsible for my unit. Voss's voice remained level. You are responsible for patient safety. Your current behavior is not supporting it. Mercer's face went pale. Because Voss wasn't threatening. He was documenting in his head. And Mercer could sense it. Voss turned to Mara again. We'll speak about your placement here later, he said. For now, you're returning to duty, effective immediately. Mercer jolted. You can't. Voss's gaze pinned him. I can, he said. And if you interfere, you'll be placed on administrative leave pending review of your conduct. Mercer's mouth opened, then closed. He sat back, defeated in that moment. Mara didn't look triumphant. She just nodded once, understood. Denise exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for hours. Dr. Sato's expression softened slightly, respect finally visible. Voss stood. Now, he said, take me to Victor Holloway. Pause. If you want the reveal that's coming, the one that makes every earlier breadcrumb click into place, comment, who is she, right now? I read those comments, and it tells me you're invested in the mystery, not just the conflict. The ICU was quieter than the ER, but not calmer. The quiet was heavy, filled with machines doing the work of lungs and hearts. Victor Holloway lay in a bed surrounded by monitors and IV lines. His skin had more color now, but he looked drained, like life had wrung him out. A nurse adjusted a drip and stepped aside as Voss approached. Victor's eyelids fluttered. He turned his head slightly. When he saw Voss, his mouth moved into the faintest smile. Director, Victor rasped. Voss leaned in. Victor. Victor's eyes shifted past Voss to Mara. His gaze sharpened, recognition deepening. You came, Victor whispered to Mara. Mara nodded. You asked. Victor's fingers twitched weakly, like he wanted to reach but couldn't. Voss watched the exchange with a controlled face. Then he looked at Victor. Why did you call for me? Voss asked. Victor swallowed, throat working around dryness. Because, Victor whispered, someone down there is lying, and because she saved my life once. Denise, standing near the doorway, stiffened. Dr. Sato's eyes widened. Mercer wasn't in ICU. He'd been left behind, licking his wounds. But the consequences of his lie were suddenly growing teeth. Voss's voice stayed calm. Explain. Victor's gaze stayed on Mara as he spoke, voice thin but determined. 5 years ago, he whispered, I was at a federal training facility, emergency preparedness, high-risk scenario. We had an incident, collapse, ventilation failure panic, people froze. Victor's eyes filled slightly, not with melodrama, memory. And then a medic trainee stepped in, he said. Small, quiet, didn't look like a hero, but she moved like one. She kept people alive until the doctors got there. Victor's eyes locked on Mara. That was you, he whispered. Denise stared at Mara like she'd never seen her before. Dr. Sato's mouth parted slightly. Voss's gaze went sharper, not surprised, confirming. Victor swallowed again. They told us her name was Calder, he said. They told us she disappeared after, classified, quiet, but I never forgot. Victor's breathing hitched, and the ICU nurse adjusted his oxygen. Victor forced the next words out anyway. And tonight, he whispered, I heard them call you rookie. I watched them underestimate you, and I knew the hospital was about to make a mistake. Victor's eyes closed briefly, then opened. Don't let them bury her, he whispered to Voss. Voss nodded once, the kind of nod that meant acknowledged, recorded, handled. Then he looked at Mara. Go back downstairs, Voss said. Do your job. Mara's voice was soft. Yes, sir. She turned to leave, and as she did, Victor's weak voice followed her like a thread. Thank you, he rasped. Mara didn't look back, but her shoulders shifted just slightly, like a burden had moved. Pause. Mara walked back into the like she belonged there again. Because she did. And the staff felt it, even if they couldn't explain why. Denise slapped a fresh badge sticker onto Mara's scrubbed top, like she was reclaiming her. There, Denise muttered, temporary ID until they restore your access. Mara nodded, thank you. Dr. Sato stepped close enough to speak quietly. That control technique, she said. Where did you train? Mara looked at her. Before nursing school, I was in federal emergency response training, medical operations. It ended abruptly. Dr. Sato studied her face. Because of what? Mara's eyes held steady. Because sometimes you do the right thing and it makes powerful people uncomfortable. Dr. Sato absorbed that. Then she nodded once. Well, she said, tonight you made me comfortable. You were solid in that code. Mara's expression softened a fraction. Thank you, doctor. Dr. Sato walked away, but the respect lingered in her wake. Denise leaned closer. Federal emergency response, she murmured, like disaster teams. Mara didn't give details, something like that. Denise stared at her, and Mercer tried to write you up. Mara's tone stayed calm. Mercer tried to control a narrative. Denise's jaw clenched. He picked the wrong person. Mara didn't smile, but her eyes said yes. Pause. Across the station, Mercer stood near the admin desk, watching. He looked smaller now. Not physically, Mercer was average height, average build. Smaller in influence, because Voss had entered his world and shown him what real authority looked like. Mercer approached with a forced calm. Mara, he said, about earlier. Mara didn't look up from charting. My name is Nurse Calder while I'm on duty. Mercer's cheek twitched. Denise looked up sharply, enjoying it. Mercer lowered his voice. We can handle this internally. No need to escalate. You understand the pressure I'm under. Mara's tone stayed even. I understand you tried to remove me from duty during an active emergency period. Mercer's eyes narrowed. You're making this adversarial. Mara finally looked at him. Her gaze was calm, but it had weight now, because she wasn't alone anymore. You made it adversarial when you threatened my credentials, Mara said. That was not patient safety, that was personal. Mercer's lips pressed thin. You don't know what I... Mara cut him off quietly. I know what you did. Mercer stared at her. Then he glanced toward the hall, toward where Voss had disappeared, and Mercer's eyes flickered. Fear. Because Mercer realized something. He didn't know who Mara really was. And he didn't know how deep the consequences could go. Pause. If you're still with me, don't just watch. Subscribe. Because part 3 is where the hospital's paper trail becomes a weapon, the antagonist is confronted procedurally and publicly, and the title promise gets paid off in a way that feels earned, not exaggerated. A nurse called out from triage. Hey, security footage is being pulled. Denise's head snapped up. By who? The nurse replied, administration, and those two guys with Director Voss. Mercer's spine stiffened. Mara kept charting. But inside, she felt the shift. Because once footage enters the room, lies don't survive. Once statements are compared, motives show. And once Victor Halloway's presence became known beyond ICU, The hospital's upper leadership would begin circling like birds that sensed a storm. Myra glanced down the hall toward observation. Darius was back in bed, but his eyes were open, watching through the curtain gap, alert. He saw Myra look and lifted his chin slightly, like a silent promise. I saw. I'll say it. Myra looked away, returning to her charting, steady as ever. Because now the story wasn't about whether she was competent. That had already been proven. Now it was about whether the system would admit it. Voss didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The moment Adrian Voss returned to the ER floor, it felt like someone had lowered the ceiling by an inch. Conversations shrank. Side glances stopped pretending. He stood at the nurse station with Denise, Dr. Sato, and Myra nearby, while one of his associates, quiet, watchful, spoke to hospital administration in a corner. Mercer hovered a few steps away, trying to look like a manager and not a man waiting to be caught. Voss's eyes swept the unit once, then landed on Denise. "Where is your security supervisor?" he asked. Denise blinked. "At night, we have Officer Eddie Ramirez and whoever's on duty." Voss nodded. "Bring Ramirez." Denise snapped her fingers at a tech. "Find Eddie now." Myra kept her hands on the keyboard, finishing a note, because she'd learned something the hard way. The best time to be unimpeachable is while people are looking for cracks. The intercom crackled somewhere. A monitor alarm beeped. The ER kept being an ER. But the story had stopped being routine. Pause. If you've ever watched someone with petty power try to rewrite what everyone just saw, comment receipts. Because from this point on, that's what wins: footage, timelines, witness statements, and the kind of calm truth that doesn't need a spotlight to be lethal. Eddie Ramirez arrived with his duty belt slightly crooked, eyes tired. He took one look at Voss and swallowed. Denise introduced him quickly. "This is Director Adrian Voss, Federal Oversight." Eddie straightened, trying to look less like he'd been sprinting down a hallway. "Yes, sir," Eddie said. Voss didn't waste time. "Officer Ramey." "Rez," he said, "walk me through the lobby incident with Darius Kane from your perspective. Start to finish. No commentary." Eddie glanced at Mercer, then at Myra. He cleared his throat. "Patient came in aggressive," Eddie said. "Tall, very tall, yelling, moving toward the counter. Denise started triage de-escalation. I stood, reached for my radio. Before I could make physical contact, Nurse Calder stepped in." Voss's face stayed neutral. "Then what?" Eddie exhaled. "She told him to step back. He didn't. He moved forward again. She grabbed his wrist, moved around him, and he went down to one knee. Controlled. No hits, no choke. He stopped. He calmed down. Then she told me to stand down, and I did." Mercer's mouth tightened. Voss nodded. "At any point did she strike him?" "No, sir." "Did you see any injury caused by her actions?" "No, sir." "Did her intervention prevent you from doing your job?" Eddie hesitated, then spoke carefully. "It prevented escalation. If I'd gone hands-on with his size, it could have gotten ugly. She kept it from getting ugly." Denise's eyes flashed with vindication. Dr. Sato's expression stayed composed, but her posture said approval. Voss looked at Eddie. "Thank you." Then Voss turned toward Mercer for the first time since ICU, and it felt like the room collectively held its breath. "Manager Mercer," Voss said, "did you interview Officer Ramirez before placing Nurse Calder on leave?" Mercer forced a smile. There wasn't time. It was an emergent situation, and..." Voss's voice stayed quiet. "You had enough time to draft a write-up and threaten her credentials." Mercer's smile cracked. "I had an obligation," Mercer said, "to mitigate liability." Voss nodded once. "Understood." That "understood" didn't sound like agreement. It sounded like documentation. Pause. Hospital administration finally arrived in full, 2 administrators in business attire, hair neat, eyes wary, and an HR representative clutching a folder like it was a shield. The lead administrator, a woman named Cynthia Park, stepped forward. "Director Voss," she said with a practiced warmth, "we weren't informed you'd be visiting tonight." Voss didn't play the social game. "You were informed your ICU is holding Victor Halloway," Voss said. And your ER attempted to remove a clinically effective nurse from duty during an active emergency period based on an unverified managerial accusation. Cynthia's smile stiffened. We take all allegations seriously. Voss turned slightly, gesturing toward the hallway. Then you'll take evidence seriously. One of Voss's associates spoke for the first time. We've already requested the triage security footage, he said. We'll review it with your compliance officer present. Cynthia blinked. That footage is internal. Voss's gaze pinned her. Victor Halloway is under federal protection protocols due to his role and current medical status. This facility is cooperating under that umbrella tonight. The HR representative shifted, suddenly pale. Mercer jumped in, desperate to regain control. This is being blown out of proportion, he said. We can handle employee discipline internally. Nurse Calder is a resident and her behavior. Denise cut him off, voice like steel. Her behavior kept your staff safe. Mercer snapped back. Denise, stay professional. Dr. Sato finally stepped forward, calm but firm. Professional is what she was. I watched her prevent escalation. I watched her run medication sequence cleanly in a code. If we're talking professionalism, we should start there. Mercer looked at Dr. Sato as if she'd betrayed him. And in a way, she had. She'd betrayed the unspoken rule that everyone protects management, even when management is wrong. Pause. Voss took the center of the conversation again, not by volume, but by gravity. Here is what will happen, he said. We will review the footage. We will collect statements. Then we will examine the timeline of Mercer's actions, when he initiated disciplinary measures, what he cited, and whether he followed policy. Cynthia Park raised a hand slightly. Director Voss, I appreciate your concern, but... Voss looked at her. This is not concern, this is oversight. The air went thin. Cynthia lowered her hand. Voss turned his eyes to Myra. Nurse Calder, he said, did you chart the triage incident? Yes, sir, Myra replied. Did you chart the code sequence in Trauma 1? Yes, sir. Did anyone request you amend or rewrite your documentation? Myra's eyes flicked once, briefly, to Mercer. Then back to Voss. Yes, Mara said evenly. Manager Mercer requested I sign an acknowledgement of counseling with his narrative. Mercer's face flushed. That's not accurate. Voss didn't look at him. Calder, did you sign? No, sir. Voss nodded once. Cynthia Park looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor tiles. The HR representative opened her folder with shaky hands. Denise leaned close. To Myra and whispered, he's done. Mara didn't answer. She didn't celebrate early. Because she knew systems. They didn't like admitting fault. They liked compromise, quiet settlements, papered-over consequences. And Mercer was the kind of man who would burn the unit down if it saved him. Which meant the next part, public justice, had to be airtight. Pause. Down in observation, Darius Kane had been listening. Not to every word, but enough to sense the shape. He watched nurses move with a different kind of nervous energy now. He saw Mercer's face, tight and sweaty. He saw Myra standing still, like a person who didn't need to posture. And he made a decision. When a tech came by to check his vitals, Darius said, I need to speak to whoever's in charge. The tech hesitated. Sir, you can talk to your nurse in OBS. I want the director, Darius said, voice calm but immovable, or whoever that suit guy is. The tech swallowed and walked quickly toward the station. Minutes later, Voss's associate appeared at the OBS doorway. You wanted to speak, the associate said. Darius nodded. Yeah, I'm the guy from the lobby. The associate's eyes assessed him, not afraid, just aware. Darius continued. That nurse called her, she didn't hurt me. She helped me. I was out of my head. I would have done something stupid. She stopped me without embarrassing me more than I already was. He swallowed, jaw tight. And that manager guy, Darius said. He's lying. I heard him earlier acting like she attacked me. That's not what happened. The associate nodded slowly. Are you willing to give a written statement? Darius looked almost offended. I'll do better. I'll say it to his face. Pause. If you want the confrontation to be satisfying without turning cartoonish, real procedure, real accountability, tap-like. This is where stories like this either cheat with theatrics or deliver the kind of justice that feels real enough to matter. The footage review happened in a small admin office beside the ER, the kind with 2 monitors and a printer that always jammed. Cynthia Park, HR, Mercer, Denise, and Voss stood behind the compliance officer as the video played. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. You could see Darius storming in. You could see the triage nurse trying to calm him. You could see Eddie hesitate, hand near his radio. You could see the distance shrink as Darius advanced. Then you could see Mara step out. Small in frame compared to him. Steady. You could hear nothing, no audio, but body language is its own language. Mara spoke, Darius leaned in, he advanced again. Mara moved. A clean redirect, a controlled kneel, no punching, no striking, no flailing. You could see Darius's posture shift from aggression to shock to compliance. You could see Mara's hands remain open, controlling but not violent. And then you could see the most important part. After the incident, when Darius was calmer, Mercer entered the frame, not to assist, not to debrief, not to check the patient. He entered to look at Mara, to speak to her, to point, to posture, like a man already building a case. The compliance officer paused the video. Cynthia Park's lips parted slightly. HR looked like she'd been punched. Mercer's face drained of color. Voss didn't look surprised. He simply turned to Cynthia. Now, he said, tell me why your nurse manager bypassed debriefing and investigation and went straight to discipline. Mercer tried to speak. Cynthia held up a hand, not at Voss, but at Mercer. Lyle, she said quietly, stop. Mercer blinked, stunned. Cynthia looked at Voss. Director Voss, we will open a formal review. Voss nodded, good. Then Voss looked at HR. And I want her leave status reversed on record, he said, with a note indicating it was initiated without full investigation. HR nodded quickly, yes, of course. Mercer's eyes darted to Mara, rage and fear mixed together. Mara met his gaze. No triumph, just calm, the kind of calm that made his rage look childish. Pause. They returned to the ER station, and Cynthia Park did something Mercer never expected. She spoke where staff could hear. Not loudly, hospitals don't do loud, but clearly. Nurse Calder, Cynthia said, your administrative leave is reversed effective immediately. You are restored to duty status with no disciplinary action pending at this time. The station went still. Then a few nurses, quietly, let out breaths they'd been holding. Denise's eyes glistened, but she blinked it away fast. Mara nodded once, thank you. Cynthia's eyes flicked to Mercer. Manager Mercer, you're relieved of duty pending investigation. Please hand your badge and keys to security. Mercer's mouth fell open. This is insane, he hissed. You're doing this because some federal guy walked in and... Cynthia's voice turned sharp. I'm doing this because the evidence contradicts you. Mercer looked around, searching for allies. He found none. Because when a bully loses his cover, people remember every bruise. Security approached Eddie, looking both nervous and satisfied. Manager Mercer, Eddie said, I'll need your badge. Mercer's hands shook as he unclipped it. He glared at Mara like she'd done this to him. And Mara, because she couldn't help being who she was, said something quietly that only he could hear as he passed. You could have just let me do my job, she murmured. You chose this. Mercer's face twisted. Then he was escorted away, down the hall, past the same lobby where he'd tried to frame her. The staff watched him go. Not cheering. Just watching. Because this wasn't a show. It was consequence. Pause. And then Darius Kane stepped out of observation. He walked slowly, IV pole rolling beside him, huge body moving with surprising care, like he'd decided to be gentle on purpose. The ER saw him and tensed, remembering the storm he'd been earlier. Darius stopped near the nurse station where Cynthia Park and Voss stood. His voice was steady. I'm Darius Kane, he said. I'm the guy who came in yelling. Cynthia's posture stiffened, cautious. Mr. Kane. Darius lifted a hand. I'm not here to cause problems, I'm here to fix one. He turned his head toward Voss, then toward the staff. That nurse, Darius said, pointing not aggressively, just indicating toward Mara, saved me from myself. She didn't attack me, she didn't hurt me. She did what nobody else did. She looked at me like I was a patient, not a threat. He swallowed hard. And I heard that manager try to say she assaulted me, Darius continued. That's a lie. If you need me to sign something, I will. If you need me to say it again on record, I will. The hallway was silent. Then Voss nodded once. Thank you, Voss said. That statement matters. Darius's gaze shifted to Mara. His throat worked like he was trying to push down emotion he didn't want people to see. I'm sorry, he said. Mara's voice was quiet. Thank you for saying the truth. Darius nodded. Then, to everyone's shock, he did something that didn't fit his size or his earlier rage. He took one step closer, still at a respectful distance, and he lowered his head slightly. Not a bow. A gesture of respect. A giant making himself smaller. I was wrong, he said. About you, about this place, about a lot. Mara met his eyes. We all have nights we're not proud of, she said. What matters is what you do after. Darius exhaled like those words hit a place deep. Then he turned back toward observation and walked away, calmer than he'd been all night. And that's when the room changed for the third time. Because the staff realized something. Mara didn't just control bodies. She changed trajectories. Pause. If that moment hit you, the apology that actually means something, drop a comment with respect. Not for me. For the idea that real strength isn't volume. It's restraint, accountability, and the courage to say, I was wrong. The ER settled into a strange aftershock. Not quiet, never quiet, but different. People looked at Mara differently now. Not like a resident to be tested. Like a professional with weight. Denise pulled Mara aside near the supply room. I need to know, Denise whispered, eyes sharp. Who are you really? Mara held her gaze. For a second, the old instinct rose. Deflect, minimize, disappear. Then she remembered Victor's whisper, the director's presence, the footage, the way the truth had clawed into the light whether she wanted it or not. So she gave Denise the safest version of the truth. I was in a federal medical response program, Mara said. We trained for mass casualty, disaster, hostile environments. We learned how to keep people alive when there was no help. Denise's eyes widened, like field medicine. Mara nodded slightly, yes. Denise swallowed. Why'd you leave? Mara's gaze drifted for a moment, as if she could see a different hallway, a different night. Because I reported something, she said quietly, and the wrong people didn't like it. Denise stared at her, anger building again, but this time it wasn't for Mercer. It was for the fact that Mara had been carrying that weight alone. Denise leaned in. You don't have to be alone here, she said. Mara's expression softened, just a fraction. I know, she replied. And she meant it. Pause. Voss met Mara near the nurse station, as dawn began to tint the windows a dull gray. His two associates remained nearby, but farther back now, giving space. Calder, Voss said. Yes, sir. Voss's eyes held hers. You handled tonight well. Mara didn't take the bait for pride. I did my job. Voss nodded. That's why I kept you. Mara's throat tightened slightly. Sir, Victor said I saved him once. Voss's gaze didn't flicker. You did. Mara swallowed. Why is he important? Voss's voice lowered. Victor Halloway is not just a donor. He sits on committees that all. Occate emergency preparedness, funding across multiple states. He also carries knowledge that makes him a target for certain kinds of political pressure. Mara absorbed that quiet. Voss continued. Tonight, he recognized you because you were part of a program most people don't know exists. You were trained to keep order when others panic. Mara's voice was soft, and you told me to disappear. Voss held her gaze. I told you to step out of a spotlight that would have chewed you up. You wanted a normal life, nursing school, hospital work, service without politics. Mara nodded once, yes. Voss's expression softened just slightly. Normal is a luxury, but tonight reminded me, you don't run from who you are, you just choose where you use it. Myra's chest rose and fell slowly. Voss extended something small toward her. Her badge. Restored official clean. Myra took it, clipping it back on with steady hands. Then Voss said, one more thing. Myra looked up. Mercer will attempt to frame this as a misunderstanding, Voss said. He will claim he was acting in good faith. Do not engage emotionally. The truth is already documented. Myra nodded, understood. Voss paused. Then, in a quieter voice that only she could hear, he added, You did not break tonight, Calder. Myra's jaw tightened, a flicker of emotion passing like a shadow. I came close, she admitted. Voss nodded once. That's why you're good, you feel it, you just don't let it drive. Pause. The sun finally rose fully over Providence, casting pale light across the wet parking lot. The rain had stopped. The city looked rinsed. Darius was discharged later that morning with instructions, follow-up appointments, and a new seriousness in his eyes. Before he left, he asked for Mara again. When she came to the discharge area, he stood, tall enough to make other patients stare, but he kept his hands visible, relaxed. I'm leaving, he said. Mara nodded, good. Darius hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. He held it out carefully, like it mattered. It's my statement, he said. I wrote it, I signed it. I told what happened, I told what you did. Denise helped me make it official. Myra took it, glancing at the top line. Clear, direct, no drama. She looked up, thank you. Darius cleared his throat. I don't want to be that guy again. Myra's voice was gentle but firm. Then don't. Take your meds, fix the supplements, show up for the follow-up, and when you feel yourself rising, remember you can step back. Darius nodded slowly. Then, unexpectedly, he did it, the moment that fulfilled the title in a way nobody had predicted back in that lobby. He lifted his right hand and placed it flat against his chest, then lowered it, head slightly bowed. Not a military salute, not exactly, but a gesture of respect so sincere it made the air feel thick. I won't forget, he said quietly. Myra held his gaze. Neither will I, she replied. Darius turned and walked out into the morning, the automatic doors sliding open softly this time, as if the hospital itself had learned to stop slamming. Pause. If you want another story where the underestimated professional stays calm, gets punished anyway, and then the truth detonates in public, watch next on the channel. And if you haven't yet, subscribe so you don't have to hunt for the next one when you're in the mood for this exact kind of earned vindication. Weeks later, the investigation concluded the way investigations often do when the evidence is undeniable and the right people are watching. Mercer was removed. Not with fanfare, not with screaming. With paperwork. With witness statements that matched. With footage that didn't blink. With a record of him threatening credentials and bypassing protocol. The ER didn't throw a party. Hospitals don't celebrate like that. They just breathe easier. Denise got a commendation for handling a high-stakes night with integrity. Dr. Sato received a letter of acknowledgement for the successful resuscitation of Victor Halloway. And Mara Calder, quiet, steady, still wearing the nurse residency patch for a little longer, was asked to join the hospital's de-escalation training committee. Mercer would have hated that, because it meant the thing he tried to punish her for had become something the hospital wanted to learn from. Myra didn't gloat. She taught. She stood in a small classroom with tired night shift staff and showed them how to read posture, how to keep distance, how to speak in a way that didn't challenge pride while still holding boundaries. And she never once made it about herself. She made it about everyone going home safe. Pause. Victor Halloway recovered slowly. He sent a letter, not to the hospital board, not to administration. To the ER. To the staff. It wasn't long, but it was specific. It named people who'd helped. It called out calm professionalism under pressure. And near the end, it mentioned Merit, not as a hero, as a standard. The nurse who kept order without cruelty, he wrote, reminded me what preparedness is really for. Myra read it alone in the break room, the paper trembling slightly between her fingers. Not from fear, from the strange weight of being seen. And she thought about the night he'd coded, about the lobby, about Mercer's office, about the badge sliding across a desk like a verdict. And she realized something that made her throat tighten. She wasn't invisible anymore. And maybe she didn't want to be. Pause. For everyone watching right now, if you've ever been the one doing the work while someone else tried to take credit, or tried to punish you for being competent, hit like. Not because it fixes the past, but because it's a small way of saying, I see that fight, I respect it. On a quiet night months later, Mara walked through the ER lobby on her way in, coffee in hand, hair pulled back, eyes alert. The automatic doors opened, and for a second the memory flashed. The storm of a man, the slammed entrance, the fear in everyone's eyes. But tonight the lobby was calm. A few patients waiting, a tired father rocking a baby, the triage nurse speaking softly to a woman with stomach pain. Mara passed the desk, nodded to Denise, and headed toward the back. And then she heard a familiar voice behind her. Mara. She turned. Darius Kane stood in the doorway, not storming in this time, but standing just inside like he understood the rules now. He looked different. Not smaller, still a giant, but quieter. He held a small paper bag. I'm not here as a patient, he said quickly, almost embarrassed. I'm fine, I just... He held out the bag. Brought these, he said. For the night shift, donuts. It's dumb, I know, but I figured you guys take a lot of hits from people like me. Mara stared at the bag. Then she looked up at his face, and she saw it. Not guilt. Growth. She nodded slowly. It's not dumb, she said. It's thoughtful. Denise appeared behind Mara, eyebrows raised. Is that for us? Darius nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. Denise snatched the bag like a prize. Well, look at that, a giant with manners. Darius's ears reddened. I'm trying. Denise pointed at him. Keep trying. Darius nodded, then looked back at Mara. I'm doing the follow-ups, he said. I stopped those supplements, my pressure's down. I hear your voice sometimes when I get mad. Mara's expression softened. Good. Darius hesitated. Then he did it again, that respectful hand-to-chest gesture, smaller and quieter now. Thank you, he said. Mara nodded once. You're welcome. He turned to leave. And as the doors slid open for him, he didn't slam them. He let them close gently behind him. Mara watched the rainless night beyond the glass for a second. Then she turned back toward the ER, toward the work, toward the life she'd built not by being loud, but by being unbreakable. Because in the end, the injustice didn't define her. The competence did. The authority intervention didn't make her worthy. It revealed she already was. And the public vindication wasn't a trophy. It was simply the world finally catching up to the truth.